Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back, listeners. Today we're focused on hydrogen energy, which is emerging as a really exciting and extremely challenging energy frontier. And we have researchers here at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources who are working really hard to make sure the state is on the cutting edge of an hydrogen industry. So today we're sitting down with Charles Nye and Sarah Buckhold. They're from SER's Hydrogen Energy Research Center to talk to them about their work and what they see as potential opportunities for the state of Wyoming. So Charles and Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Let's start by each of you sharing a little bit about your background and how you came to be in this center focusing on hydrogen energy research. So Charles, let's start with you.
Yeah, so thank you, Holly, for having us on the show. I'm a geologist and I started off with water chemistry. So I ran around the state finding out what was dissolved in our water naturally. When water flows through rocks, it picks up minerals in it, and I was the guy who figured out what those minerals were. It turned into exploring for hydrogen because water and hydrogen are linked, as we'll get to later. Over to you, Sarah.
So I came to Wyoming for my graduate research, and I did both my master's and my PhD in the mechanical engineering department here in Wyoming at the University of Wyoming. And my studies, my focus was a little bit different than Charles. I actually started with more atmospheric science and looking at the potential of using green energy or like solar and wind energy for the production of hydrogen through electrolysis. And that's how I got connected with the Hydrogen Energy Research Center, where now I've been working on a lot of different aspects of hydrogen energy, and just really excited to be here.
Nice. I don't think I realized you were working on hydrogen even as a student here at UW.
Yeah, I was actually part of the Hydrogen Make, Move, Use, and Store through the Hydrogen Energy Research Center and the startup. I was one of the recipients, the original recipients that got some funding from that project for the end of my graduate research.
Okay, shows what I know. So yeah, we funded that, and that is one of the great things that we get to do is, number one, we're able to fund faculty on hydrogen or any number of topics across the University of Wyoming, and that translates often into funding students, both undergraduate and graduate students. But then it's like an extended interview, right? And or an internship. And so what ends up happening is that we identify like incredible talent like you, Sarah, and then we can hire you.
And it's sometimes unexpected. I remember actually being on the review committee for this, and Sarah's proposal was a weird one.
Really?
It took a different angle than we had expected. It did fit the strict language of the proposal requests, but it thought outside the box, and we really liked that. And so we got surprised on our own request for proposals.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So today, now you're both firmly in the Hydrogen Energy Research Center. It's really been incredible to watch the growth of that center, both in the number of collaborations and the topics you're working on. We're going to talk about both of those during this podcast. But I'm curious, what excites each of you about working on hydrogen specifically for Wyoming? Sarah, why don't you start?
I think the coolest thing about hydrogen is its versatility. Mm-hmm. It can be used as in a strict sense, it's an energy carrier.
Right.
But it can really be used as storage or electricity production. It can be created so many different ways, whether that's like naturally forming or through methane or through electricity. So I think that's the coolest thing about it that I like is just how many ways we can make it, how many ways we can store it, and how many ways we can use it.
Nice.
And I guess the same for me. I'd say I like it because it's new, and new areas are full of fresh, weird ideas. And it's also an opportunity to start educating people from a clean slate, which means that it can have more of an effect on people's lives. And hydrogen's cool because it uses, in some of our cases we'll talk about later, it uses a waste product from Wyoming oil and gas. And it can also be made with methane, which the state has in abundance.
Sure.
And increase the value of those things. So I like how it can take Wyoming's existing strengths and make them into a new thing that's exciting and causes people to think creatively.
Yeah, well said. So for listeners who might not know, Charles, why don't you take this one? Can you talk about the vision and mission of the Hydrogen Energy Research Center here at SER?
Yeah. And so we've got sort of 5 parts to our mission, and they mix and match to fulfill. 5 parts
to your mission?
We do. But they generally mix and match to match up with the university's mission, the 3 bits of teaching, outreach, and research. And so we're supposed to develop hydrogen resources using all feedstock options for a robust production ecosystem. And to me, that's really the mission statement. Mm-hmm. But to flesh that out, we also are supposed to invest in infrastructure to support these resources, identify and develop end-use options for these resources, and support regulatory and policy frameworks for hydrogen, which means like offering input to lawmakers and regulators who are trying to deal with a new thing. And then the final one is to teach students, of course. So those last 4 bits really play into supporting the first bit, but we strictly do have 5.
Wow. And this center is like 3 years old.
Yes.
Yeah. So, wow, that's impressive that you have a 5-part mission. But
it could also show disorganization. Maybe we should have down selected a bit.
Oh, it's great. Great. And I should say, this is one of many centers of excellence. This is how we organize ourselves at the School of Energy Resources. And we bring in partnerships across the university and beyond, which we'll talk about later. And that I think this model is really being shown to work of building these centers of excellence that are real collaborative. So, Charles, let's go back to you again to start. And then Sarah, talk about some of the flagship projects that are currently underway at the Hydrogen Energy Research Center.
Yeah. So we've got one that takes Wyoming gas produced waters. This is a waste product from oil and gas development. Water is entrained with the oil deep underground. And so when you pump out the oil, you also pump out this really salty water. It's saltier than the ocean. And you have to do something with that salt water because it's not drinkable. You can't use it for livestock. Mm-hmm. But if you treat it, you could. More commonly, though, it's just put right back where it came from, back down underground.
High costs associated with that.
Yeah, it takes a lot to pump water out from a hole that's over a mile deep and then pump it back down a mile deep hole. So this project that we work on tries to turn that oil and gas produced water into a resource at the surface by desalinating it in a way that leaves the water hot. And then we run it through a process that needs hot water as an input. And we don't have to reheat it because it's already hot from being desalinated. And that allows us to get some efficiency out of it and turn this old waste product into a valuable commercial product, hydrogen. So that's one. Another project we have looks at naturally occurring geologic hydrogen, or sort of enhancing naturally occurring geologic hydrogen. When iron rusts, it oxidizes. And we know this because, when you take your fishing boat out, if it's not aluminum, you'll see it, it's rusted out in the bottom or at the waterline. We think that underground, and we've got some preliminary results that say this is possible, if you find reduced iron underground and you break that rock up a little bit and inject hot water, the water will cause the iron to rust. And if there's no other source for the oxygen to oxidize the iron, that oxygen has to come from the water, which then leaves behind the other part of H2O, which is just H2. And so
which is hydrogen.
You can make hydrogen, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, what about you, Sarah?
So another project that we have right now, partnering with some private industry, is looking for potential of geologic hydrogen in the state. And that can include sources like serpentinization that Charles was just describing.
What's that word?
Serpentinization.
Serpentinization? Okay.
The mineral looks like a snake in the rock. And
okay.
So,
that is a really cool name, actually.
Geologists are really clever with their names. Yeah.
I actually didn't even know that that's where that term came from.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're all learning.
Vein. It's a little wiggly vein.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Say it again.
Serpentinization.
Okay, go. Keep going.
But also looking at natural hydrogen that can occur for a number of different reasons, there's a lot of theories behind why the geologic hydrogen can occur. So this project's just kind of looking at the potential for the state with the geologic hydrogen.
Cool. And I would know, even though I think I said this is a pretty young center in terms of our centers of excellence, but it has accomplished some big things, and you can see just the simple number of projects and the different areas you're working on, I think does a good job demonstrating how this center has been set up pretty quickly to where it's now being impactful. And I think part of that success is related to building partnerships. And I think that you all have done a really good job building partnerships from, I mean, it really started with University of Wyoming faculty and staff, and that's how, you got involved, Sarah. But it extends beyond that to national labs and industry partners. So can you talk about some of these partners and the value of these relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our early partners was Williams, the Williams companies. And we performed a project called W2H2 with them to look at how hard it was to transport hydrogen in a pipeline. Basic sort of feasibility research to enable a hydrogen economy. And we participated in measuring some waters at the various sites that Williams operates to see if they might be clean enough that we could do this electrolysis procedure with them, or if they needed to go through our produced water treatment method that uses steam methane reforming to make hydrogen. So we partnered with Williams on W2H2, and that was also sponsored by the Wyoming Energy Agency and the governor's office and the legislature. All of the Wyoming government supported that. We then have partnered with a private engineering and construction firm in Cheyenne. That company is helping us out with building a larger prototype of this device that can desalinate produced water. So those guys. And we are also partnering with 4 professors. It sort of comes full circle.
Yeah.
We went out to state government and it came back to UW. We're partnering with 4 faculty members on the Rust hydrogen. Yeah.
And there's a national lab involved as well.
Yes, the supercritical desalinization project requires the help of national labs, Los Alamos in this case. They are providing the basic technology and the basic design principles of the device.
I think what's really cool is that by partnering with faculty, in some cases, you're kind of like filling that innovation pipeline and the work that's being done here. I mean, some of the geologic hydrogen, we'll still talk about that more later, but it's still kind of early stage. But then at the same time, by partnering with Los Alamos National Lab and an EPC firm, that you're actually building this prototype for the desalination process for steam methane reforming, but it's a more efficient process because you're using produced water. So it's really cool how you kind of have a lot of different what we call TRL, technology readiness levels projects. So we've been talking about it. One of the most exciting projects that you're working on in terms of seeing something come to fruition soon is creating hydrogen from produced water. And as you said, it's an expensive issue for the oil and gas industry. And now you're looking at the opportunity to make something valuable out of it. So it's really cool. So Charles, talk about what's happening right now and anything else that we haven't mentioned that you think is promising or exciting about the technology and the project.
Yeah. So this project is particularly exciting to me because it fulfills one of my golden rules, which is you should do something that makes everyone happy and satisfies a broad number of goals for everyone. It should be a win-win situation if you're doing stuff right. And this one's nice because the state of Wyoming is an arid mountain desert, but we are also a headwaters state, and the Green River system puts about as much water into the Colorado River system as the Colorado River does itself upstream of their confluence. In fact, there was a time when people argued that the Colorado River Basin should have been called the Green River Basin. So Wyoming has water, but is dry. It has rainfall compared to other states in the Colorado River Compact. And one of the things we want to do is leave as much water as we can in the Colorado River, both for our own people to use in agriculture inside the state of Wyoming, and to meet our obligations to the downstream recipients of water in the Colorado River Basin. One of the ways we can do that is by somehow adding water to the bank. And this produced water that we pull out of the ground, it's co-produced with oil. This produced water that's really, really salty is an option to do that. If we can clean this up and remove the salt content from it, we have functionally added water to the system. And so instead of, 2 people fighting over a sugar bowl of the same size, we've now made the sugar bowl bigger by adding water to the system. And of course, we propose, to use that water to make hydrogen. which when you combust it turns back into chemically pure water. But it could be diverted before going into hydrogen and just be used for flat out water.
Yeah. And we have a whole Center of Excellence on that too.
Yes.
The Center of Excellence for Produced Water Management, which is a mouthful, but it's a really important topic, not just for us here in Wyoming, but really across, especially the West. So talk about for the produced water to steam methane reforming to create hydrogen. Are there any technical or economic challenges that you're kind of focused on right now?
Yeah. In fact, it's funny you should mention the Center for Produced Water and Management, because we've worked with Jonathan Brandt before. And one of the big challenges is that you can design a really cool membrane that does a great job of removing salt from the water. But if it is good at removing salt, it will struggle with oils and vice versa. And this technology that Los Alamos came up with, supercritical water desalination, which basically means you heat the water up to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, well above boiling, but you keep it in a pressurized container so it does not actually boil. When you do this, it causes the oil in the water to just burn in place. And so we can burn oil in the water. Underwater. And that then gets rid of those fouling waxes and paraffins that would otherwise be challenging to filter out. And you can then, process the water in a more normal way. So that's sort of one of the challenges we're dealing with is the oils and the gas in the water. And we're trying to make this thing efficient. We're trying to heat the water once and keep it hot. And that's really challenging to do when you get into the details. Hot things really want to cool down. And we're trying to design this thing so it will operate in the dead of Wyoming winter.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's a really exciting project, and I can't wait to see where it goes. And I love the whole idea behind it. Like you said, it's kind of a win-win, and it's just meeting a lot of different goals. So it'll be exciting. So, okay, let's talk about geologic hydrogen. That phrase, the phrase geologic hydrogen, it might be new to some people. So Sarah, let's just start like 101. What does that mean?
Yeah, so geologic hydrogen's a really broad term that can be used to kind of cover any type of hydrogen that is naturally occurring in the subsurface. So this can include different processes like hydrogen production from microbial activity. And so this is like microbes can just kind of be emitting small amounts of hydrogen.
This is something that happens naturally.
Yeah. And so it's a small amount, so that's not necessarily a resource, but something to keep in mind when we're kind of looking at sources of geologic hydrogen. Another type is the serpentinization, or that rust type reaction that Charles was talking about earlier. There's also radiolysis, and this is where radioactive elements can split water into oxygen and hydrogen, again, so we could potentially source out that hydrogen. And then the last type is like deep earth hydrogen, or hydrogen that's coming up from the mantle and can be released through cracks in the Earth's crust. Some call this like mantle degassing or primordial hydrogen.
Okay.
So just really old from the center of the Earth.
I don't think I realized there were so many different ways like the Earth could naturally create hydrogen underground. So how do researchers go about studying whether, no matter how it was made, whether this hydrogen is present underground and whether it could be maybe potentially accessed?
Yeah, so it's actually the biggest question right now. It's a super new area of study, and we're still learning about different methods that we can actually understand these and measure them. We're still trying to learn why geologic hydrogen can occur and how best to measure it using non-destructive and cost-effective methods. I think one of the biggest things we're working on right now is an understanding of the local geology and geologic features. And this is important for knowing what type of geologic hydrogen we may be looking for, or if the little amount that we're finding is just due to little microbes producing it. And then to locate and understand if potential large reservoirs could exist, and what skills and expertise that we can use that really exist in the state, from oil and gas methods to actually utilize this resource.
So is there anything that makes Wyoming kind of like particularly attractive as a place to investigate geologic hydrogen?
Wyoming has some really unique geology in terms of we have like a really thick crust in this area. We have some of the oldest geology in the country, in the continent. But we also have decades of experience in locating, drilling, and transporting energy through our oil and natural gas industry that's in the state. And so we all, like, this is true both in industry experience and in regulatory framework, that we are a state designed to be able to take advantage of these energy resources, especially in the subsurface.
I love that.
We also have
go ahead,
the
Charles.
university itself.
And SER.
Well, and SER, of course, yes. So minus the self-compliment society, we do actually get some benefits from being here. I mean, UW has had a long history of basic science, sometimes looking at things that seem a little bit silly, like stable isotopes. Stable isotopes are atoms with the same chemistry as all other atoms with the same name. So hydrogen 1 behaves the same as hydrogen 2, but it has a different mass as indicated by the number. Hydrogen 1 weighs 1 unit. Hydrogen 2 weighs 2 units. These things are not radioactive. When we think isotopes, we think radioactive isotopes. That's not the case here. These are stable isotopes that don't have anything to do with radioactivity. And due to some basic research at University of Wyoming and the Stable Isotope Facility, we have a really good method for measuring hydrogen isotopes, stable isotopes. And part of deducing where the hydrogen has come from, whether it's radiolysis, whether it's primordial deep earth hydrogen, whether it's chemical hydrogen or something involved with surface processes, is to look at the ratio of hydrogen 1 to hydrogen 2 and see what that ratio means. It's sort of a fingerprint for the hydrogen. And that's basic science that we never thought would have an application to exploration, but here it does. So yeah, UW is sort of our secret weapon as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we've kind of try to support different areas across the university as well.
You never know when it might matter. Yeah.
So let's talk about economics, because at the end of the day, no hydrogen or anything we work on will be successfully able to enter markets unless it can compete economically. Geologic hydrogen is really interesting from this perspective. Can you talk about the economics, Charles?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of weird. Hydrogen is categorized by the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission as a gas, as a natural gas.
It's part of the definition of natural gas in Wyoming. Yeah,
exactly.
Just learned that.
Yeah, and it's cool because it flows in the subsurface even more liquidy. It flows better than natural gas. So if you imagine all of the struggle people go to produce heavy oil, because it's really gooey and it's hard to pull it out of the ground, it takes a lot of pumping. It's a worlds easier to produce natural gas, and that's part of why natural gas is so cheap to produce in Wyoming. We're good at it, and also it flows better in the subsurface. Hydrogen flows even better still, and so it would require less pumping to get it to the surface. If you find a reservoir of hydrogen, there's some evidence that it might even self-lift to the surface, negating all pumping costs, which is crazy. But if true, and if realized, that means that it's even cheaper to produce than natural gas.
That's really interesting. Okay. Keep going.
And so there's that kind of hydrogen, which is ungodly cheap as long as you can find it. And then there's also the synthesized hydrogen from water, hydrogen from methane, all of that other sort of stuff. And those tend to be more expensive. And so it is important when we're talking about hydrogen to distinguish between where the hydrogen came from and how expensive it might be, because these options to synthesize it are more expensive than geologic hydrogen. But if one of these gets started, it's going to kick off hydrogen infrastructure. It's going to bootstrap the system. It will allow the emergence of that economy, and then it will be cheaper for all the others to follow on. So I predict we might have a situation where geologic hydrogen gets normalized, and then these other forms of hydrogen add in.
Kind of piggyback on there?
Exactly.
So I went to a conference not that long ago, and someone said something really interesting about geologic hydrogen. They said, I think this is a sleeper. It's kind of like we haven't been looking at it that long, but if it was successful, to your point, I mean, we already know how to drill in the subsurface. So we know how to produce it. We know how to burn it and create energy or, convert it. We kind of know what to do with it once we have it. Now it's very difficult to transport. So we have to think about that. But I thought that was a really interesting comment. So just first reaction, like, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's sneaky. I think one of our friends calls it a ninja.
Oh, ninja. And Sarah, what do you think? Is geologic hydrogen a sleeper?
Yeah, I think it definitely has the potential, to really revolutionize the energy industry if it turns out to be,
it could
a valuable resource.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so just like slightly deviating, let's talk about hydrogen from iron-bearing rocks. So you kind of introduced this earlier, Charles, and it's still geologic hydrogen, but in this case, it's like we would be taking activity to create it versus what we just talked about, where it's like we're trying to find it if it's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So here, this is economically speaking a little bit closer to like that synthesizing world, because here you wouldn't just go down and drill a hole and poof, it's coming up.
Yeah.
It's a gusher. You instead would have to drill this hole and do some things. And so it's more akin to enhanced oil recovery, where you're drilling, one or more boreholes. You're enhancing the system somehow, normally by adding porosity through fracturing the rock on purpose in a very controlled way, and then running water through it. And because this is now a semi-engineered system, it's challenging to work with. There's so many variables, so many things we could do, so many treatments. And we have to be careful because there are problems like this hydrogen, like I said, it flows really well. Mm-hmm. If you make these fractures too large, you might end up losing the very hydrogen that you're trying to create down there.
That wouldn't be good.
No, it'd be very bad. Which is why, Wyoming having expertise in fracking really well and fracturing the rock correctly and doing so safely is a real advantage.
Okay, so you frack and then you would you already talked about this, create a reaction.
Yep.
Okay.
You inject hot water after you fracture it. So you need to get surface area to flow through. And once that surface area is available, chemical reactions can happen when two chemicals contact. And so here, the iron chemical in the rock and the water chemical itself need to be in touch, and then hot enough, and you get this reaction to happen.
Okay.
And we've seen that it happens. We've done it in the lab. We've partnered with University of Texas, Austin, and we've got positive results. This is actually happening. The question is now the details.
Mm-hmm. So what exactly are we working on in this space at SER and across the university right now?
So we've got a few parts. One is considering what happens when this reaction happens to the rock. We know that iron takes up more space when it rusts.
Yeah.
And so it is possible that you will do everything right. You'll fracture this rock, run the hot water through it, hydrogen comes out. And because the rock now is rusted, it will just seal back up that crack you worked so hard to make.
So you don't get the hydrogen out? Okay.
Exactly. So we're investigating that. We're investigating whether it might overfill the crack and then just sort of self-propagate. I'm generally against that line of thought, but it's something we're investigating. And we're also looking at whether microbes might eat the hydrogen that we worked so hard to get and produce something else. Uh-huh. Hydrogen is a high energy source thing. And so if a molecule has hydrogen, carbon, and a few trace nutrients, it just goes gangbusters and multiplies like none other. We need to be careful about what we send down the hole and clean and sterilize things so that we don't have microbes eat all of our hard-earned hydrogen.
Yeah. Don't eat our hydrogen. Okay. So is there anything about Wyoming that makes it kind of attractive for this work?
Yeah. And in fact, we were sort of brought along to one of our projects with UT Austin, who is very experienced and very advanced, sort of brought us on board as the junior partner. But we contributed some samples from Wyoming that suddenly sort of increased our ego and our standing in the team, because we contributed some samples unknowingly that had 14% reduced iron in them. And these are from the Iron Mountain, South Pass, Atlantic City area in Wyoming. A set of abandoned iron mining operations that are too hard to make economic nowadays, but once upon a time were economic to produce. We sent some of these samples to UT Austin, and they have the highest concentration of reduced iron on the team. There are other places where the iron has already been rusted, and they do outperform us. But this particular set is a unique Wyoming attribute. And the fact that these mines were uneconomic to keep producing from is actually a plus for this project, because it means you could go back and do this frack and inject hot water procedure and turn iron resources that currently don't do anything for the state into a revenue source.
Nice. Go Wyoming.
Woohoo!
Okay. So there's obviously a lot of work going on. We haven't talked about all the projects, nor came we on a single podcast that this center and your collaborators are working on. So Sarah, can you talk about the partnerships, whether it be with industry or government or other researchers, will be really important for us to move some of these projects or these ideas from research to being reality, like commercial reality?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a loaded question because I think it's really all of the above. You know, the support of everyone is really important for this moving forward, and not just for Wyoming. The national energy use has been fairly stable for the past few years, but right now we're facing unprecedented energy increases with the rise of data centers and AI.
Yeah.
And it'll really take everybody working together to help with that energy resiliency. And this includes industry, researchers, government. I think it's kind of an all hands on deck situation.
I think that's a really good point. You know, you think the idea that like these different energy sources are competing against each other, like just forget about that, right? Like we need everything, and the time it takes us to build energy infrastructure in America, like we have to have everything, you know? So I think that's really well said.
The pizza's getting larger.
Pizza's
Everyone
getting
can
larger.
have a large slice.
Yeah, you can have a large slice. Everybody gets a large slice. But it needs to cook faster, which is a different topic we're not going to cover today. But so for listeners who want to learn more about some of this work, where should they go? Where could they start?
Yeah, be sure to check out the School of Energy Resources website. We're always having some different events. We post all of our current research on each center's page. So the Hydrogen Energy Research Center has our own page, and we talk all about a lot of our different projects. We also have pretty frequent community events, so that'll be on our calendar on our website. And I think that's...
Yeah, we'll leave the URL for the center, for the Hydrogen Energy Research Center at the bottom of this podcast description so people can find it. So, Charles and Sarah, tell me, what's one thing you hope people take away from this podcast about Wyoming's hydrogen potential and hydrogen future? Charles, you go ahead.
I think hydrogen is new is the big takeaway. And like any new technology, we don't really know what its full potential is going to be, what it's going to grow into. And yes, you know, you have to be cautious in these situations, and that means taking some safety precautions, enacting, you know, some laws to guard against, you know, bad behavior. But we need to keep in mind that the more we restrict the hydrogen industry, the less creativity we'll see. And one of the most beautiful things about a new energy source like hydrogen is that people get real creative and they do some zany things, some of which actually work.
And some of which like could work for something else that we haven't thought of yet, right? Like the isotope, you know, we didn't create that to be trying to figure out where hydrogen came from or anything like that, but it's really valuable. So.
Exactly. I mean, it sort of, it fell out later.
Yeah.
And so I'd say that, you know, we need to keep an open mind with these things, and the less restrictions we can do, or the more targeted we can make the restrictions we must do, the better, because that will maximize creativity. And the market will deliver us, you know, whatever the lowest price hydrogen is out there. Mm-hmm. We should let them all compete freely in the marketplace and see what floats to the top. Someone might get creative and do something bizarre.
Yeah. And Sarah?
I think one of the biggest things is that, you know, Wyoming's poised to take a frontline seat on the hydrogen industry. And so it's really exciting to see what could become of it in the near future, and just that Wyoming will be ready for it.
And I love how it's both our geology, our expertise, you know, people come to Wyoming to be geologists, and the fact that we can work so closely with industry and national labs, I think we have a lot of things going for us. So it's really well said, Sarah. So for our last question, you're almost off the hook. We always ask, you know, a question that helps us celebrate this incredible state that we're fortunate enough to call home. So often this is the hardest question of these interviews. But Sarah, let's start with you. What is your favorite place to be or to visit in Wyoming?
That's really, yeah, you're right. That's a really hard question. I don't know if I can quite pick that. I mean, I love the Pole Mountain recreation area just because it's so close, you know, 15 minutes, and we can be biking, hiking, horseback riding, but I'm always exploring new parts of the state. And that's really cool that in, 8 years, I still have so unexplored area.
Yeah. Charles?
Wow. Well, I'm a total homebody, so I suppose
Your house.
Absolutely.
No, that's not.
That's not a valid answer. I'd say one of the two mountain ranges on the other side of Laramie, the Laramie Range or Snowy Range. They're both beautiful. The Snowy Range is particularly cool because that's where the Wyoming Craton ends, and that means the old center of Wyoming, the deepest and oldest part of the United States, onto which everything else glommed onto. And we get some really weird geology up there, which is fun to go out and look at, like the French slate.
Oh, you could look at trees or rocks on the ground or like animals
Rocks
or
are
whatever.
so much better than trees.
Well, Charles and Sarah, thank you so much for all you do for us here at the School of Energy Resources, for folks across the University of Wyoming, for everything you're doing for the state. And thank you for doing the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.